Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Veg Grower Podcast. My name's Richard and I want to encourage and inspire you to grow more of your own food in whatever space you have available. And I do this by sharing exactly what's been going on in my own allotment, my own kitchen garden here in Littlehampton on the south coast of the United Kingdom. I have been growing my own for over 30 years, but I still learn something new every single day. Now, coming up this week, I've received a question about crop rotation, which we're going to get into a little bit later on. Down on the allotment, it has been a wet, windy week, but we have found time to head on down there and get a few bits and pieces done. And then back home in the kitchen garden, there's been lots of plant sowing going on. So without much fuss, let's get on with it. Well, I'm out in the kitchen garden now this weekend, this whole week, there has been a lot of wet, rainy weather again. Feels like the last few weeks, all we've spoken about is how bad the rain has been. Really, really annoying. And at the moment, it's not raining. This is one of those periods where I managed to just jump out in the kitchen garden and get on top of a few things. Now, because it has been so wet, I'm a little worried about my chickens. Generally speaking, my chickens are okay. They're in a coop, they're in a run that does have a tarpaulin top over them. So in theory, when it rains, it should keep them quite dry. But at the moment, I feel the rain has been so constant that even inside their run, the soil, the clay soil I have here, is just looking rather wet and boggy for them, which worries me an awful lot. Now, I do try and add some straw to give them a bit of dry area to go around. The trouble is they're walking around in wet mud, their feet are getting wet and damp, and it could cause them some damage. So I get very worried by that. Now, there's not much I can really do. We do add sand, we do try and improve the drainage in the coop, but at the moment I think the rain we've had has just been so mega that we cannot do anything about it. What I think I'm going to do when I eventually get round to sorting out their area, I want to make a few adjustments. What I think I will do there is sort of pull in a French drain, an underground pipe that just helps to drain out any moisture that we might have in their area. I think that will tidy it up a bit better and it help their feet not be so wet all day. It make a big difference, it really will. But unfortunately, I can't do anything about that at the moment. I'm just a bit worried by my chickens. You know how much I love my chickens, how much I love having them in the garden. I do get a little worried. Elsewhere in the garden, everything's growing quite well. We've got garlic, we've got chard, we've got even purple sprouting broccoli starting to show itself. So things are doing really well, and I'm wandering around thinking, what can I do outside at the moment? Apart from weeding, there's not very much. So I spent a lot of my time indoors, sowing seeds, including things like aubergines. We've been sowing celery, celeriac, leeks. We've been sowing chilies and things like that just really do get us off to a good start. Cauliflowers, cabbages, all these sort of seedlings and seeds that are going to make a big difference in the future. And I'm glad to get myself ahead of them. Now, when it comes to seed sowing, what I tend to do is I buy in seed compost. This is a very fine compost, already sieved. Keep that in a box. And then when I want to sow some seeds, I scoop 4 scoops of seed compost into another box with a scoop of perlite, and then I will fill up plug plant trainers. Now, I keep these in a separate box. The box is designed to fit in my plug plant trainers. This is just so I don't contaminate everything stays separate. It's just my way of trying to be a bit more organised. Seeds generally, when they germinate and when they grow, they don't need much in the way of nutrition. So seed compost is low in nutrition and the perlite just helps with the drainage. So Really, really simple, but once they are growing well, once the roots are strong, we then need to pot them up. And that's something else I have been doing a lot of lately, potting up my chilies, my aubergines, all those sort of plants that I've started off early. Now, I have found that by starting them in plug plants, which is something I started doing a few years ago, we are reducing the amount of waste that we get, but it's also making the whole potting on procedure very, very quick. So I simply pop out the plug plant and I pour that into another pot, a 5.4 centimetre pot with compost. Now this is a different compost to what I use for seed. I don't use seed compost, I just use multi-purpose compost. And I use multi-purpose compost, got a bit more nutrients, it's not so fine, but they are the only two composts I need to buy in, seed compost and multi-purpose compost, apart from, of course, our homemade compost. But for my seedling compost, what I do is I take 4 scoops again of multi-purpose compost, I then take a scoop of perlite, I also sprinkle in some general plant feed, something like Grow More, just a balanced plant feed. I don't do it in huge quantities, just a bit of a sprinkle, and then I give that a good mix, and I find that that is enough nutrition in there just to get our seedlings growing a little bit stronger. At the moment, of course, my seedlings are still indoors, still kept in the warm under heated propagators and grow lights. I'm going to be talking about grow lights next week actually, but they're just getting themselves underway and they're growing quite strong. But as I've said in the past, February is a good chance to sow a lot of seeds, providing you have somewhere indoors you can grow them. And that's what I'm doing at the moment, getting our seeds growing, getting our seedlings going, and we're looking forward to seeing how it turns out later on in the year. Now, I did mention earlier that we've got a lot of plants growing in our garden. I'm looking around now, I can see there's some lovely kale. This is red Russian kale. I've been growing here over the winter. It looks absolutely delicious. I'm going to take some pickings of that, some chard, some Brussels sprouts and some purple sprouting broccoli. All of these things are going to go into the kitchen to be used in many, many dishes. One of the other things that I have been doing, I've got some parsley growing that was sown back in November and it's growing outside. It's been absolutely happily growing outside and it's quite big. So I've harvested quite a bit of parsley. And what I've done is I've taken it indoors, I've given it a good wash and then I've potted it into my dehydrator. Now, I do grow quite a bit of parsley and I do prefer fresh parsley, but sometimes you just want some dried parsley in the store cupboard. So back before Christmas I got myself a small dehydrator. I've had a dehydrator for years, but it is a large one. It has no thermostatic control. We use it for dehydrating some treats for Roxy, but the smaller one now, quite a nice size, has a thermostatic control. So I turn that to 35 degrees C, and I have found that drying parsley at that temperature for about an overnight period of time actually leaves us to some good dry parsley. So really, really has proven to us a good dehydrator is a must if you want to extend your storage of your garden produce. They're not all that much money, if I'm honest with you. I'll add a link in Amazon if you are interested. Right, with that, it is time to head on down to the allotment. In the meantime, let's find out what's been going on in the Supporters Club this week. Well, you know what's coming up at this point of the podcast. It's that point where I ask if you are enjoying this podcast, then please leave a rate and review on your podcast provider. It only takes you a few seconds, but it really helps us out. It helps us get found by more people who might also be interested in learning more about how to grow their own food. But not only that, if you are enjoying this podcast, you want to help keep the work that we do going, then please consider becoming a member of the Veg Grower Podcast Supporters Club. For just £5 a month, you get access to extra behind-the-scenes podcasts that give you a bit more of an idea what's going on here at the Veg Grower Podcast HQ. But added to that, once a month, you also receive through the letterbox our monthly seed pack. And that seed pack contains a collection of seeds that I've carefully chosen to be sown in that very month. but also you get a copy of our mini newspaper. Now, our mini newspaper gives you a few instructions on how to grow those seeds that I've just mentioned. But I've also developed the newspaper to be a bit of a tool, a bit of a guide, something you can use to keep track of what you're growing and what you need to do. For me, I think for £5 a month, it is an absolute bargain. But as an example, over this last week, we have sown some aubergines in the club. These were seeds I included in February's pack. So that gives you an idea of what you can expect by being a member of the Veg Grower Podcast Supporters Club. Details on that at theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk. We would love to have you as a member. Right, back to the gardening. Well, I'm here on the allotment. I came down to the allotment early this morning because it was the best opportunity to get in here while the weather was relatively dry. This is quite a relief because this week, once again, it has been pretty much non-stop rain. This feels like the last few weeks, the allotment has really suffered because it has been non-stop rain. So I've had to jump into the allotment where I can just to try and make the most out of the dry weather when I can. I really want to spend a whole day down on the allotment, just really cracking on, getting the allotment into a really good shape, ready for the growing season. We are into February, of course, and February really is the last of the winter. And I'm focusing on just getting those last few winter jobs done so that come March we can really crack on and get the allotment ready to go. Now, because it has been so wet over the last few weeks, I am a little worried about how my soil here on the allotment was going to be. When soil, especially clay soil, gets really wet, it becomes very sticky, very heavy, and when you stand on it, the soil just squelches. Well, luckily, my allotment is fine, and I pop this down to the fact that I do a lot of my gardening in raised beds and I practice no-dig gardening. So our soil is becoming quite free draining. However, as an example of how bad the soil is, you will know that in the past on the tracks, when I brought my vehicle down, we've got stuck in the mud. And I don't bring my vehicle down during the winter months anymore because it's just too much of a risk of getting stuck in the mud. But luckily, the allotment is fine. This is another reason why I like raised beds. There's a lot of advantages for raised beds. And for me, it's just the fact that we can actually get free draining soil when we are working on clay soil. Now, what have I been doing this week? I have focused a lot on the area at the top of my allotment with my neighbours. This is the problem area. I tackle this every year and it never seems to get resolved. Because my neighbours vacated their allotment over 2 years ago, it has been empty for 2 years and the brambles and the weeds have grown really high. I try and do what I can by cutting things back where I can, but there's only so much I can do. Technically, we're not allowed to go on anybody else's allotment, but sometimes just to tidy things up, I do, just to protect my side of the allotment. The trouble is, right in a particular area where I've got this huge bramble bush that has grown, there is a load of plastic pots that have been dumped there. Plastic pots, plastic containers, bags of stuff, just dumped. And unfortunately, that makes it very difficult to actually access the bits I need to access. It's really annoying, really annoying. But luckily, because everything is dormant and died back, it makes it a lot easier to see what I can actually do. And all I did, I got a really heavy duty set of loppers and I just cut through these brambles where I could in order to keep them down. It looks a lot better, I have to say. It does look a lot better. I want to do more. I really would love it if somebody would take on that allotment and really go to town on it, but it doesn't seem to be happening any time soon. However, I've got to say the top of the allotment is certainly becoming easier and easier to manage in the last few years. This is always a bit of a problem area, don't get me wrong. There's always been a tricky area. But I have found by trying to keep on top of it regularly, by adding a straw mulch to keep weeds down, we have seemed to be winning with it. It's just where it comes over from our neighbours. And I'm sure I'm not the only person that has trouble with neighbours and their weeds. I'm not saying that I am the most cleanest and tidiest allotment holder by far, but when it's a vacated empty plot, it can be very annoying. In fact, I'm pretty much surrounded by empty plots. I'm looking over at, we used to have a Portuguese family to the side of my allotment. They were here with their grandparents, themselves and their kids. And they built this huge shed and they were working down here every single day. And again, they seem to have vacated a couple of years ago. We've not seen anything of them and they left it all in a state. The council actually had to come along and knock the shed down and remove a lot of stuff on that one in order to get it back down to ground level, which unfortunately that means the taxpayer was costing a lot of money for that allotment. I don't like that myself. I don't like that. Now, on another note, what I am noticing is there are certainly some signs that things are about to spring into growth. I've been looking at my thornless blackberry and I'm starting to see some little buds on it starting to produce leaves and flowers, signifying that it's starting to jump into life. And hopefully that's soon going to lead to producing some good blackberries this year. And it produces these delicious blackberries, I've got to say. I don't know what the variety is, but it is absolutely delicious. Wandering around, I've also noticed my garlic is looking really, really strong. My onions are looking really, really strong. And the work that we did last week with the potato beds is looking good as well. Overall, I'm very, very happy with how everything is going on the allotment. I would just like a bit of dry weather for a good period of time so I can really go to town on what I want to do on the allotment. It will happen. It will happen. And I'm sure I'm not the only person who's struggling with their allotment at this time of year. Most of the work goes on back at home. Well, that's what's been going on here on the allotment of this week. I'm going to head on home. And in the meantime, let's find out what's been going on in the kitchen this week.
Chopping all the veggies, sizzle in the air. Chef's got with the magic, smells are everywhere. Water starts to boil, onions hit the pan. Recipe of the week, let the feast begin. Cooking with Chef Scott, flavors come alive. Tune in every week for a tasty bite.
This week's recipe is using one of those winter staple leeks. Leeks are just one of those crops that just quietly earn their keep all winter long. They're reliable, unfussy, incredibly versatile, and this week's recipe just uses those leeks in a simple, comforting pasta dish that really lets the leeks shine with just a gentle kick from the whole grain mustard. So what we do is we take 2 leeks, we trim off the roots and the dark green tops, slice them lengthways and then chop them into thin half moons. Just wash them thoroughly to remove any grit. Then we bring a large pan of salted water to the boil and cook 250 grams of pasta. Any pasta would do, depending on what you might have in the cupboard. Cook the pasta to the packet instructions and then you want to drain them, but it's also worth at this point just saving a mug of the cooking water before draining them. Now what we're going to do is heat some oil or butter. I do like to use butter a lot these days. In a large frying pan over a medium heat and just add those leeks and then just gently cook for 8 to 10 minutes until soft and sweet. Then we stir in some garlic and cook for another minute. Then we add some cream and some whole grain mustard, season well and just gently simmer for 2 to 3 minutes. Then we add the cooked pasta to the sauce along with a splash of the reserved pasta water to loosen if needed. Mix everything together and serve. And it is as easy as that. Lots of things you could add to this. Cheese, mushrooms, bacon, bit of lemon, anything you want. It's such a versatile dish and absolutely delicious. I highly recommend you have this as a great simple dish to bring out those leeks. Go give it a try and let me know how you get on. Well, I'm back in the podding shed now, and as you know, on most podcasts, I ask if you would be good enough to leave me a rate and review on your podcast provider. It only takes you a few seconds, but it really means the world to us. One of the great things that we get out of that is sometimes it helps give us something to talk about. And this week, we have had a review come in from Lynn. Lynn is quite a regular on Spotify. She often does leave us reviews, but she says this week, "Hi Richard, I'm indoors with a hot chocolate trying to plan my veg beds for the year. Can I ask, do you think crop rotation on a plot is necessary? It's gardened organically and never dug. It's my third year on the plot and I have been very random about the location of different crop families. Also, I've put in perennial brassicas and can't move them. Can you help? Thanks, Lynn." Now, this is something that has given me a lot of thought lately. Often I have practiced crop rotation, particularly on the allotment. In fact, crop rotation on the allotment is continuing for the time being. The main reason I practice crop rotation, however, is in order to make it easy for me to harvest. So I'd have garlic all grown in the same bed because the garlic all comes out at the same time. However, the real reason that crop rotation is often spoken about is it reduces the build-up of pests and diseases in the soil. So, for example, if you're growing potatoes in the same bed year after year after year, there's a good chance the pests, the diseases, the eelworms, for example, are going to be in those soil and they're going to build up and build up because you've got the food that they want to eat. The other side of this is, of course, if you are planting the same crops in the same bed, they're going to deplete the soil. Ways around that is that when I would do crop rotation, I would incorporate things like green manures or my legumes, which help add nutrition to the soil. They also help clean the soil in some cases. So there was things we could actually do, especially during the periods of downtime. But my idea here was the crop rotation would be rotated. So where my potato beds are this year, next year would be my brassicas or my legumes, my peas and beans, for example. So that is the general idea of crop rotation. However, crop rotation is not always easy in a small space. When I first started gardening in my parents' plot, I did not have a huge plot. Crop rotation was near enough impossible. So all I had to do then is just make sure I didn't plant the same plant in the same place for 2 years running. Things like tomatoes or cucumbers, we had to mix them up and move them around, but just make sure they were not grown in the same place year after year. The current thinking now, however, is that crop rotation is less of a problem in a small scale. The real thing is, especially with what I'm doing more with polyculture, because I am mixing my planting up, there is less need of crop rotation. We've just got to remember to not plant the same plant in the same place 2 years running. This means that where I've got my tomato, for example, this year, the tomato may not be in that same area. It may be in a other end of the bed or something. We've just got to play around and see what happens. But also we're going to be planting companion plants, which should help deter pests and diseases from the soil as well. So things like chives or mustards are very good at fumigating the soil or acting as a natural repellent to certain pests that might grow, say, carrot root fly, for example. So what I would say is crop rotation isn't exactly necessary these days, but you do have to just be a bit mindful of what you're planting and where, and also think about what companion plants you could do to aid the deterring of pests. Now, Lynn also mentions about perennial brassicas, perennial kales, perennial cabbages, those sort of plants that are in the ground for a long time and often take up the ground for a long period. And that's absolutely fine. If we think about it, when we grow apple trees or pear trees, they're often in the ground for 10, 20 years, and it doesn't necessarily cause them any problems. All we've got to be mindful is if those apple trees or pear trees or perennial kale or perennial brassicas do get a certain disease, that disease could be in the soil for a very long time. So we have to be mindful not to plant that same crop in there should the disease come along. Now, with perennial brassicas, one of the biggest problems that I can think of would be club root, which is a very nasty disease that affects a lot of brassicas, and it can remain in the soil for 20 years or more. We just got to remember, we cannot necessarily always stop diseases. We can just do our best to beat them. And again, this comes back to companion planting and things like that. So to answer your question, Lynn, no, I don't think crop rotation on the plot is necessary. We just have to be a bit more mindful about what we're planting and where. But we also have to pay attention to diseases, but also think more about our companion plants at the same time. Don't worry too much, it is all fairly easy. Hope that helps. And if you are like Lynn, you want to get in a rate and review, then please do. We really do love having them, and we love hearing from you. You can, of course, email me, richard@theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk. You can head to the website, theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk, leave a voicemail or leave a comment on the blog post, or, of course, you can find me on social media. Added to that, we also have the Supporters Club if you want to help support the work that we do. Details on that at theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk. Well, that is it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. We will be back again next time. So until then, please take care.